Hey there, corner mates. Back again. In this video, I'm going to speak a little bit on mental health. For those of y'all that know that I'm a real big advocate for mental health. Starting with, from making sure that you know what it looks like, knowing how to interact with folks who experience these things. And I always like to talk about just my experiences to kind of help to educate people about what mental health really is, and also to kind of start the conversations to kind of help take away those negative stigmas surrounding mental health. So, in this video, I'm going to share my personal experiences as it relates to mental health. I think in my intro video, I stated that I am a person living with a mental illness. Starting right there, that is the starting point of a lot of the times we like to call people or label people by their diagnosis. That in itself takes away the humanity of a person by saying, "Oh, they're bipolar," or "They're depressive," or "They have ADHD," or "They are PTSD." When you're labeling the person, you're like, that's calling that person what it is versus of saying they are a person who lives with a mental illness. So I am a person who lives with depression. I am a person living with anxiety. I am a person that lives with being bipolar. It's a part of me. It doesn't define all of me. So taking off, first of all, starting with taking off that label of that's a schizophrenic person. That's a person living with schizophrenia. Starting with there. So I my mental health journey starts way back. I think I was first diagnosed. Well, I think when most people were diagnosed at a young age with ADHD. I do remember having to take the popular drug Ritalin as a young child to kind of help keep me focused and not all over the place. I was one of those children. I was a little active and just couldn't really focus a lot. Once I got older, and I want to say it had to be around when puberty and stuff was starting to set in, and my family kind of moved a lot. I remember we moved when I was in sixth grade and had to, start with new friends and things like that, and then coming back, moving a couple times, and I think it was around the age of 13, 14, pretty much around that time that I kind of started to come into my sexuality and like with discovering all of that and being teased and being bullied, being starting foster care, which I think it was before then. But anywho, I'm getting beside the point. But I was diagnosed with depression starting around maybe 12, 13. And what that looked like was I was very, very moody, very isolated, very just sad all the time. You can't really I didn't really have the interest to do a lot of things. I preferred to be by myself and not interact with folks because my interactions with folks had not always been the greatest. And so for me, it's always been a struggle. It started off real early, and so not having the necessary skills or tools that I needed to kind of cope with certain things, it was left kind of untreated. So I did the whole therapy and having therapists when I was younger, and in my recollection, I don't really remember it like really helping and having to take the medicine and doing the therapy. I know I remember doing that um, once I was like 14, 15, and living in a world where, first of all, being black and having a mental illness that just didn't exist back then. And there was the whole notion of you don't have stress, you're young. I was 14, 15, so 14, 15, you're not stressed, you have nothing to be stressed about. Like, it was just like, it's just, you need prayer and all of that. And it was like nobody was really taking the time to figure out what was really wrong and what was causing issues with me, um, which led to hospitalization. So that was I had my first hospitalization when I was 15 for suicidal thoughts. It was around the time like I said, I had just came out and trying to deal with, being out, and now I'm at the age of where I'm wanting to explore and find a boyfriend, and you want to be like everybody else. Your friends are dating and going out, so you want to do the same things. But then also being in foster care, I'm living at someone's total home, in another person's home, having to, you know, be with this person. I don't know this person, and trying to function like that. Also, during that time, one of my younger cousins that I was very close with was killed in an accident, car accident, and so had all of that grief and loss and trying to find yourself, and it was just a lot going on, and I just couldn't take it, and I just had a moment. I remember I was standing in the kitchen. An incident had occurred where I had started talking to a guy, and he up and decided to stop talking to me. There were some behind the scene things that happened with parents and things like that. And at that time, I just didn't know how to handle that, and just kind of lost it in my mind. That's the best way I can describe it. And I remember going into the kitchen, and I grabbed the knife, and I stood there in the kitchen for probably, it wasn't even, I don't think it was that long, but it might have been longer because I was probably not there. And I remember my foster sister at the time had came in the kitchen, and she saw me holding the knife in my hand. My foster mother came, and so they called the police and everything, and I had to go to what we have here as a crisis and assessment center here in Wake County. And I remember going to the crisis and assessment center, and I really don't remember like being like fully present. I was just like, wasn't like all over the place, erratic. It was like a very calm, which I think didn't really go over so with them. But the one thing about that experience, I do remember being handcuffed. That was very, it was kind of dehumanizing because, well, let me backtrack. So went to the crisis and assessment center, and they determined that I needed to go to Holly Hill, which is our uh, inpatient psychiatric hospital here in Wake County. And I remember they put me in handcuffs and put me in the back of a police car and drove me down the street to the hospital. So as a 15-year-old black male who's been brought to seek to get help or treatment for suicidal ideations, you put me in handcuffs to take me to the hospital. Okay. So that right there is already you're adding on to trauma, and just adding on trauma to a situation where a child's already in crisis. So I get to the hospital, and I remember sitting there, and I really didn't want to be there because I in my mind felt like I was fine. By the time I got all the way there, I had kind of, in my mind, thought I had kind of calmed down. And I remember sitting there, and I remember asking the lady, like, how long am I going to be here? And I remember them telling me, it'll just be 3 days. And then a week and a day goes by. And I remember, of course, I got put on medication and had to go to therapy and things like that. And I remember getting out of the hospital, having a car ride with my foster mother. And in this part of it before this was I had kind of came out to my foster mother right before the hospitalization happened. And I remember having that car ride and being told that you have to leave my house because you being gay clashes with my spiritual beliefs. So, again, people, the way you interact with folks that live with a mental illness, you don't really fully understand the things that you can say or the things that you do, how that can impact somebody. And so at this moment in time, you have a 15-year-old who is freshly out of the loony bin, but that's what I call it. But and you decide to tell this person that they can no longer live in your house. but this child is supposed to go on and thrive and be happy and be successful and not be sad and not feel abandoned, not feel unwanted, not feel like nobody cares about them. But you don't address any of those feelings. So I ended up having to move from her house and I ended up going to live with someone else, which I will talk about my whole foster care journey in another video. But just from a young age, for me, I've always dealt with depression, and then anxiety was added of having to move and having to start places and not really knowing people, and then me being that I'm an African American gay male who's out, having to deal with how people are going to respond to this in a time when that really wasn't a popular thing. And so just going through all throughout high school of, feeling unwanted, feeling just unhappy, like not believing that, you were loved and that you were cared about and that people really wanted you to be around because you've been put out your home, you were living in foster care, you've been put here, you've been taken here, you've been friends have dropped you and stopped talking to you. And so you're at 15, you've experienced a lot of grief and loss and just some things that your other peers may not be necessarily going through. And then on top of that, you're having to deal with just the normal teen stresses of, being in high school and starting new schools and things like that. So then you move on to, so high school. It was just a lot of drama. But again, it was one of those. I never presented in a way that people would think that his person he deals with depression all the time, because I was always very fun and laughing and joking and just always very upbeat in front of people. And because that's what you have to, like, in my mind back then, that was, you have to put on a smile and you have to go out in the world and fake it till you make it, because you can't let people see you looking weak. um, and people don't understand, like, for a child that's that young, that's a lot that you're telling a child to do. It's a lot for a child to take on, the fact of you have to live two different lives of, when I'm in public, I have to present in a positive way that I'm happy. When I'm not happy, I have to present like everything is just hunky dory when it's not. And then once you go back to your home or wherever you're living, the people don't know you're in your room, you're isolated, you don't really talk, you cry yourself to sleep at night, and you're just kind of going through all of that stuff. So for me, it was a lot, and it was one of those things where, this is why I always tell people that I've learned to function with it, because that's basically how it is. Once I left the house, it was, you put on the mask, you go to school, and you do what you're supposed to do. You focus on grades, you focus on friends, you focus on being in activity, so that you don't have to think about all the other stuff that causes you to not feel very good about yourself. And so all of high school dealt with that. Got to college, and by this time I stopped taking medication. I wasn't taking medication because I didn't really like it. I never felt like it was helping me, and I felt like I had more so of the side effects than I did, which, when dealing with medication, a lot of people, I don't want to say they're miseducated about, well, that's pretty much the word, they're miseducated about the effects of medication. Medication can be really helpful for people who do have serious mental illnesses, and sometimes it's definitely needed, because most mental illness, there are imbalances in your body. There are things that need to be balanced to, kind of help bring those levels and things back normal. But the thing about medication is, you have to monitor it. You have to be, when you're on medications, you have to make sure that you're being honest and that you're reporting things, so that whoever your psychiatrist or doctor is, they can make sure they can pair you with the right medications, because not all medications work the same for everybody. So you have to make sure, if you go the medication route, you have to make sure that it's something that's going to work for you, all the way around. So you had to pay attention to side effects and things like that. And back then, I really wasn't a person to like speak up for myself. So I really wouldn't say. I would just say, I don't like the medicine. I don't want to take it. And but you would have nobody to kind of be in your corner to speak up for you to say, well, can we try this or let's do something different. It was they just kind of left it at what it was. So even going through college, I've experienced, like I said, I've been dealing with living with the depression because it's just there's a constant feeling of being alone and not feeling wanted. Not when you're in a constant state of struggle and having to fend for yourself and kind of things like that, that's just it adds more burden. So you don't really, and again, not being taught from an early age how do you cope with these feelings, which leads to you maybe doing other things, having unhealthy coping skills, what leads to adding more stress and more trauma to your life because you end up in situations that might not be very helpful, but that's only because you don't have the coping skills. And then the notion of being able to reach out to say that you need help is always, you know, it's hard, especially in the black community. So went through all through grad school, not grad school, I'm skipping undergrad, and again, it was one of those things that I got up once I left my room. It was you put on your mask and you smile and you be friendly and you're the fun and you crack jokes and you make everybody else feel good. You worry about everybody else and things like that, and you don't take care of yourself. You don't let people see that on the inside you are crumbling. And so you involve yourself in activities and all of that, and that's exactly what I did. I made sure that I was involved in activities and doing things. And I know there were times where, like again, in college, one of my older cousins was murdered, and that was like a setback for me. And I had a younger friend who was also murdered, and just kind of dealing with my relationship with my father because it was very, I don't want to say tense, but it was very kind of strained back then as well, and dealing with being single because just my dating life has been horrible, and trying to good grades, and I was sick a lot in undergrad, and that came from being stressed and not having the proper coping skills and things like that, and not seeking the appropriate help. I don't remember. I don't. I think I went to the counseling center maybe like once and would never go back. But it was just because I tried my best to kind of bury those feelings and just kind of involve myself in other things. And I remember, I want to say it was either my junior year or my senior year in undergrad, and I had a professor who was paying attention to me, is the best way I can say it, which it kind of threw me for a loop because when you're used to being in that mode of I'm putting on a mask, you're thinking, no, so nobody can see that I'm not okay. And I remember this one particular professor, he called me into his office and he wanted to talk. So on this particular day, I remember I was in a good mood. Like I was not like very down or anything. I was, upbeat and happy and like feeling like, feeling myself a little bit. And I remember going into his office and we were sitting there. I didn't really know like what he was calling me in office for, so I was kind of already a little anxious and nervous about that. But I mean, I didn't think I had done anything wrong, so I was just like, well, maybe we're just having a conversation. And I remember getting in there, and when I tell y'all, he read me for filth, and I was like, oh, okay, like you just came from me. But I remember he was just like, I wanted to talk to you because like I've been paying attention to you, and he was basically like, you look a mess. And I was looking like, but I look good today. Like, what are you talking about? And but he was just like, I watch you in class, and he was like, he would notice that I would always be very reserved. I would always sit. I was present, but I wasn't always fully present in the class. And he was like, I would notice like you'll say things and you contribute to the class, but like I can see like when you speak like you can contribute more, but I can see that you sit there and I can see with just your appearance and your presence that something's not fully right. And for me it took him saying that it really just kind of shocked me because it was just one of those things that somebody's always looking. I always tell my kids, somebody's always lurking, and you never know. And I, in my mind, I was thinking nobody pays attention to me. Nobody is, that concerned or that involved in paying attention to what I do. And so having that conversation was something. It kind of it woke me up a little bit to kind of be more present to the fact that okay, I might not be doing as well as I thought I was with hiding my pain and my struggles and things like that. Um, and so again, like I said, I kind of went through undergrad, kind of was able to, have that mask and kind of live that life. But meanwhile, I'm adding trauma in different situations that I experienced undergrad that were not always that great. Um, but I'm adding more stress and trauma and drama on top of unresolved issues from younger years and things like that. And I'm still not addressing these issues and I'm not coping with these, not learning the necessary coping skills. So grad school comes along, and that is when the damn shit hit the fan. Everything came crumbling down. Um, I just remember like grad school was not what I expected. Well, I didn't know what to expect because grad school was never really in my plan to do, but it was by the time I graduated, it was like that was the thing, you go to grad school and get your life. Did not know how hard it was going to be just in general. But then when you add someone like me who deals with depression and anxiety and things like this, I was struggling very sick. I remember having to go to the health center more than I ever had to go, and my body was shutting down on me. And being told that you have to be on bed rest for a couple of days because that's how bad your body has shut down because you're stressed and not coping well is like, okay, like something's really going on. Like you don't pay attention because even in undergrad, like I think at least once every year, I had a ailment or something that had me that I had to be like in the bed or was incapacitated because my body was not doing so well because I was stressed and not talking and not dealing with whatever was going on. And it was hilarious. I remember she came in there and like I remember she handed me some papers on like depression and anxiety and I had a lot of panic attacks during my starting in grad school. They were more prevalent. I had them in high school and things like that, but hadn't had one in a while. And then grad school came along and they kind of revved up. And I remember her handing me papers, and I remember her saying, "Yeah, you need to go home and rest for like 2 days." And I'm looking at her like, "What the hell am I supposed to do for 2 days? Like, you really want me to be in my bed alone for 2 days with nothing to do, with to be left with me and my thoughts? That's not really good." But I had to do that because my body was not responding. And just I remember the first year of grad school was it was weird because I was adjusting to moving back. I was in Greensboro, then moving back to Raleigh. Now you're living kind of on your own and having to, pay bills and worry about where your food's coming from. Like it was a lot, and having to work and be in school and be in an internship, and it was a lot to kind of handle, and then still not really having a great support system and things like that. And I remember one day I was outside and walking, and I went to the pool house at the club, the pool at the clubhouse, and I'm sitting there, in my mind again. I always refer to it as losing it. Like I was legitly like losing it in my mind, and every negative thought that I could come up with was just coming down on me. And it was at that point where I decided you need to call someone, and I ended up calling the on-call crisis center at States for the council center, and that was a moment like, yeah, you need to go and talk to somebody. And I remember going in there, and I met with the lady, and I was like, "Listen, I'm here. Like, I need help. I can't function by myself anymore. Like, I honestly need to talk to somebody." And for the 2 years that I was in grad school, I was a regular at the counseling center every week. Like, when I say the receptionists, all three of them knew me by name. All I had to do was walk in there and I'm here. And they would check me in, but I knew I needed to be there. I needed the support because I was not handling things very well. Like, had lost weight. According to one of my professors, I looked really gauntly back in grad school. Like, I probably looked like I wasn't hanging in. I wasn't holding it together very, very well.